Hello, and this is a book review. In this case, it's a course review of this course slash book, Understanding the Mysteries of Human Behavior. I'll start with a quick review, probably a 4. Probably give this a 4 or a high 3 at least. But probably a 4 just because I don't have a lot of courses with a 4, so probably give this a 4. It's pretty interesting, straightforward. Most of the lectures are interesting and informative. I learned some things. Some things are known, but the professor is very coherent, eloquent, and again informative. So that's the most important thing. Not too long. Again, some of the things are already known and they're like in every other book, but the way he conveyed the information is pretty well. So overall, he's getting a 4 probably. Let's see the notes. First one here is, men are more represented in the edges of the bell curves. So this is what usually happens, is that men are more represented, so they're like in both sides of the bell curve. So the higher side and the lower side. So they do more like crazy things, they dive more, and they represent more in those edges, for example in math or other disciplines. And also on the lower side, so there could be very dumb or they don't die and all that. So both edges. The human motives are be socially acceptable, treated fairly, belong to a group, influence others, and forming intimate relationships. So this is what the 5, I think it's 5 motives that he says that those are the most important ones that as humans we have, which is be socially acceptable, treated fairly, so you're not going to be cheated, belong to a group, you have to be a part of a group, and we need to influence others in some way, and forming intimate relationship, that's another important motive. We are more afraid of snakes than cars, even though much more people die from cars, for the reason that we had millions of years in which we learned to be afraid of snakes. So we are more afraid of snakes than cars, even though if the evolution would work on us for more years, we should be more afraid of cars because you're more likely to die from car than a snake. There's not a lot of people dying from snakes, but many people are dying from cars. But evolution worked only in the past, not as much in the future. We don't have cars as many years as snakes, so we are afraid of snakes. Evolutionary wise, false positives are safer than false negative. So evolutionary wise, if you have a false positive, which means that if you think something is positive but it's not, so you thought it's a lion, usually that's the best example, you thought it's a lion but it's not a lion, it's better than a false negative. False negative is you thought it's not a lion and it's a lion. What happens in false negative? You die. False positive, you live. And just scared for no reason, but you still live. We are living in a modern age with Stone Age brain. I like this phrase. That's one of the reasons we are a very aggressive species. So again, we live in the Stone Age, but in a modern world. The brain is a Stone Age brain, but in a modern age. But we're still very aggressive because of that Stone Age brain. All humans share 99% of their genes. Overall, we share 98% with chimpanzees. So that's pretty much a lot. I was like, oh shit, it's only 1% difference or something like that. The 50% genes you share with your mother are from that 1% that we differ. So usually you say you only share 50% of your genes with your mother. So it's like, how does that go well with the 99% we share? So that's only from the 9%, from the 1% we differ. That's where you get the 50% from your mother and from your father. Heritability of height in America and Nigeria is quite different. The reason is that environmental factors play a role in Nigeria, but not in America. So usually the heritability of height is a little bit different in America and Nigeria. And the reason he explains is that in Nigeria, they have sometimes malnutrition problems. They have environmental factors, which is usually nutrition. In America, we don't have it. So heritability is not as, I'm not sure it's like if it's higher or lower, but there is a little differences between, it could go both ways when I'm thinking about it. But environmental factors definitely play a role, and therefore in America it's not as, in America it's one thing, and in Nigeria people, environmental factors plays much a bigger role. Hope that makes sense. Next one is, we share about half of our genes with our siblings. So that's the same thing with we share 50% of the genes with our mother, which is only from that 1% we differ, but same things with our siblings. On average, two siblings share the same personalities just as two strangers do. So sometimes people think that siblings have similar personalities, but in reality, two siblings share about the same personality traits as two strangers, which is like quite staggering. High self-esteem does not translate to success. It is the other way around. Usually it's, if you have a high success, if you're successful, it means you have high self-esteem. It's not the other way around. Self-esteem is more like a gauge. It shows you how well you're doing. So it's the same idea. So that's like a gauge, like if it's high, you mean that you're doing very well, not because you have high self-esteem. People think you can increase that artificially and that works, but no, it's not. It's more like how well you're doing. It's more like a gas. Okay, how much do you have? High gas or low gas? How much success do you have? High or low? Emotions or action response are automatic reactions to the environment. So this is like emotions, he also calls it like action response, similar to emotions. It's automatic reaction to the environment. This is how we react automatically to things that happen around us. Shame, unlike guilt, focuses inward rather than outward, which makes no sense, and it's not beneficial to fix relationship. So shame, it's not like guilt, it focuses inward rather than outward. So we go inside, we're being even more internalized, and it makes no sense because it doesn't help to fix the relationship. Usually that's one of the causes for that shame. So it's some kind of it doesn't make sense on the evolutionary. Hedonic adaptation refers to the tendency of getting used to a new situation such as happiness or more money. So that's hedonic adaptation. We get used to things even when it's bad or when it's good. So if you just won the lottery, it will take a little bit of time and you will get used to it. That's hedonic adaptation, both for good and bad. One of the reasons some people suffer from chronic stress is because of the delayed environment we live in today, which is unlike our ancestors who lived in an immediate environment. So this is one of the reasons why we can be stressful, because we need to delay gratification in our lives. Ancestors lived in an immediate gratification environment, but in today's life, if you live that way, you're not going to succeed. You have to learn to delay gratification, and sometimes it makes people very stressful. Hurt feelings are usually a result of lower than expected mutual relationship interests. So this is what hurt feelings are. So again, lower than expected. This is not what we expected. Our mutual relationships interest. So you thought they like you more, or you like them more than they liked you, something like that, and you end up with hurt feelings. Social pain, similar to physical pain, are indications that something is going wrong. Babies cry when their mother leaves for the same reason. So this is what social pain is is making similarities to physical pain. And this is just telling us that something is going wrong. And a good example is that when babies start crying when their mother go away because they feel something is going wrong and they need food. Their source of food and affection is going away. So that's the same idea of social pain. When people are treated disrespectfully, it's often their reason to overreact, which shows I'm not going to take disrespectfulness. So this is what people sometimes when they treat it disrespectfully, they overreact. And the reason that they overreact is to show I'm not gonna take this disrespectfulness in the future or even right now. It's like a show of force in some way. Populations where police is not present much, there is more emphasis on being overreacting to threats. It's interesting. So if there is less police, people are becoming more aggressive and there is more emphasis on being overreacting, because that's the only reason, or that's not the only way, but this is the best way for you to show that you're a serious person and you're not going to be messed around with, because the police not going to help you. So you need to establish credibility in some way, and that's the way. That's interesting. According to research, expressing your anger either at someone or punching a bag, for example, does not reduce anger level. Oftentimes it's even increasing it. So usually people think, oh, just go blow some steam. And apparently, according to research, it's not helpful. And sometimes it's even causing the opposite effect. Self-control is often hard to maintain because immediate gratification is constantly presenting itself against long-term gratification. So self-control, same problem as we've seen before with the immediate and delayed gratification. Here it's long-term and immediate gratification. This is why it's hard to maintain self-control, because there is always here, especially in the modern world, you always need to have a long-term gratification. You're always presenting with sugars and food and a lot of gratifications. But if you think, you need to think forward long-term. When you cannot eat this, you can do this. And self-control is often hard. Self-control is much easier when you're conscious, but when you get distracted, it's much easier to fall for bad habits. So self-control is much easier when you're conscious. So if you're conscious, you slept well and everything is good, it's all good. But when you're distracted, it's easier to fall. Distracted could be just like you have a lot of on your mind, you're distracted, haven't slept well, and many other reasons. Encoding failure refers to a failure to remember the information rather than forgetting. So this is encoding failure. Sometimes you just forgot the information. Encoding failure, unlike forgetting, is failure to remember in the first place. When people are asked to remember something in two different occasions, the memory was different, but still the participant thought they remember it correctly. It's interesting. So two different occasions, not associations, could be. Two different occasions people were asked about memory, and they gave a little different response, but they still thought both of them were correct. So that's weird. Strange things are not weird to us in a dream because the prefrontal cortex is not functioning. It's a good way. So we can fly, or crazy shit is happening in dreams, but we don't think it's weird because the prefrontal cortex is not functioning when we sleep. So no one is checking facts in some way. Or going back to the prefrontal cortex, the adult in some way is not there. It's just like, okay, no one is, yeah, whatever. Keep on going. And people rank their initials letters higher than other letters, so they like their own letters. So that's some kind of a bias to our own letters. That's like I was like, oh, okay, that's this is It goes that far. We even like our own initials. There are two types of narcissists. One is just hiding a vulnerability. The other is when they think they truly are better. So two types. One of them is just hiding. So sometimes it's like low self-esteem. So sometimes it's hiding a vulnerability, but oftentimes it's like they really think they deserve better and they deserve everything. So two different types, and it's good to distinguish between one to another. There is no evidence to support that humans need to have self-esteem. So there is no scientific evidence to support that we even need it. So it's interesting. It seems like adolescents argue more than other people, probably due to stress that comes as they change drastically in adolescence. So it could be that it's not, they don't really argue more, but if they do, could be that it's a result of a rapid change in their environment as you grow up, especially in adolescence. You learn a lot and there is constant change in your brain or in your environment, and you're just being stressful. So when you're stressful in general, you're more likely to argue and outburst or burst. Adolescents think more risk as they find it more rewarding. Their prefrontal cortex is not as functional. Going back to their prefrontal cortex, it's not as functional, so they take more risk and they even find it more rewarding. The adult brain, in some way, hasn't fully developed yet. We also call prefrontal cortex as executive functions. So again, some kind of an adult or similar. We have only a third of our ancestors are men, due to the fact that not all men reproduce. So I don't really fully understand how this exactly works, but only a third of our ancestors are men. The rest are women, because not all men reproduce. Some of them do not pass their genes. I would say also maybe some of the women do not reproduce. I don't know exactly how it works. So again, it doesn't make full sense to me, but I still think it's an interesting fact. I'm sure it's a fact. I haven't checked it yet, but if I want to do some research, maybe I'll do some. Feel free. It used to be not cool to be tanned, since it meant that you worked outside. So it wasn't socially acceptable, or not socially acceptable, but it was being white or being tanned. It's a better way. Being tan was not as cool as it's today, because usually it meant you work outside and you have no money, something like that. We are more competitive as groups versus as individuals. So as individuals, we're not as competitive, but when we get into groups, we become more competitive. So it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure he's going into reasons of why, but you can always hypothesize why it's happening, and it's interesting to think about it. Sorry about that. Passionate love is similar to OCD, as both consist uncontrollable thoughts. So passionate love, it's similar because to OCD, because most or both we are consisted of uncontrollable thoughts. So it's like the brain pattern are extremely similar. Adrenaline can grow the heart fonder. Arousal might increase or decrease affection depending if we like. No, what's happening with my phone? Depends if we like the person or not. So this is what adrenaline. Sometimes people disassociate adrenaline if they like or dislike the person. They have like a very known study about it. I'm not going to go into details, but adrenaline can go the heart fonder. So if you're aroused, that has nothing to do with if you're that person. If you're aroused before you met that person, you would like them more or less. Could be less, depends if you like them or not. But if you like someone and you're aroused because you just rode a motorcycle or whatever, you will like them more than would like them otherwise. Same thing if you just don't like them, you would like them less than if you would like them otherwise. I hope that makes sense. Comparison level refers to when we compare the relationship to a level and we disregard benefits versus costs. So we have this level of comparison. We just compare everything to that level without thinking about it in terms of cost versus benefit. Do we have more relationship problems today, or people just expect more? Same thing with divorces. It's an interesting question. Do we have more relationship problems, or people are just expect more, or they're more aware? It's a really interesting and important question to ask. Maybe people go, oh, we just have more problems today, or do we? Do we have more problems? Maybe people just didn't report it before, didn't care about it before, they have bigger problems to care about. So do we have more problems, or we just expect more? Same thing with divorces. Maybe people are like, why would I take shit from you? I'm just gonna get out of here. Similar ideas. So do we have more problems, or people are smarter in some way, expect more, can do by themselves? I think he even cites the fact that women today can work for themselves. They're more independent, so they won't take shit out of their husbands. They can live by themselves now. So it's a really interesting questions. Marriage euphoria lasts about 2 years. So this is marriage euphoria. You're deeply in love and infatuated in some way. And it's only lasts about 2 years, which is about the time to grow a baby. So that's like an evolutionary thing. Sometimes relationships start a loop of not being responsive, which cause the other side to not be responsive, and so on. So it's like a reinforcing loop. So you're not being responsive, so the other person, the other side is not being responsive because you're not responsive, and so on, and it's a disaster. When we blush, our heads gets hot, and we tend to avoid eye contact and wear awkward smile. So this is what happens when we blush. So our head gets hot. I think he cites the fact that it's more blood flowing into your head, and you avoid eye contact and wear an awkward smile. According to one theory, blushing is a result of unwanted attention, which causes people to look away. So he cites a few reasons, a few theories of blushing. No one really knows. It's like some kind of a riddle. Sense is not fully solved this conundrum or riddle, whatever you want to call it. So according to one theory, a result of blushing is a result of unwanted attention. We don't want it. And what it causes, usually also, if you see someone blushes, usually will look away. And this could be one of the reasons. It's like, okay, look away. I don't want attention right now. Get lost in some way. And people do. So I like that theory. I think that's the last one here. According to one theory, laughter is used to show that you're fun to play with. So this is some way to show that, okay, I'm okay to play with. I'm cool. I'm fun. Let's play. Additionally, laughter can enhance social connections. So we both laugh. That might increase social connections. So that's the theory of why laughter is good, or that's the benefits. Evolutionary, I guess. So that's it for notes. Again, interesting. I definitely recommend. It's maybe I don't want to do like a low. Usually my new rating system is you have 1, 2, and then we have 3, which may have low and high 3, 4 and 5, and it's barely getting to 4. I don't want to do high and low 4s, but it's definitely, if I get it, it's definitely getting a high 3, and I might even gonna give it a 4 because it's pretty good. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.